Hello, my wonderful, beautiful friends, guys. Welcome back to r/MaliciousCompliance, where people follow exact orders despite someone. And in today's episode, it's all about students getting back at their Karen teachers, guys. And OP follows a teacher's orders, and little does the teacher know it would destroy her career. Guys, I hope you enjoy the stories today. Hit subscribe if you're not subscribed, and as always, you can send or link your post to this email right here. Let's dive in. Okay, so since Christmas is right around the corner, I've got a funny story to share with you. I believe there's two types of middle school teachers in the world. Those who teach because they love children, and those who teach because they positively loathe them. My teacher, named Miss G, was definitely the latter. She made my 5th grade class a misery for me and many others. She was mistrustful, condescending, and as you might imagine, a real stickler for the rules. So come December, she had a special assignment for us, which was write a letter to Santa Claus. Now, I took issue with this because my family didn't celebrate Christmas and I wasn't 6 years old. Normally, I kept my head down, but this, come on. I approached her as the class ended. It was an exercise in practicing letter writing composition, and yeah, I got that. And I asked, couldn't I write a letter to someone else, like anyone else, please? At that, Miss G says, the assignment is to write a letter to Santa Claus, and this is who you'll be writing to. I don't care if your family doesn't do Christmas, nor believes in Santa. No ifs, ands, or buts. So I thought to myself, alright lady, Santa Claus it is. And here's the letter I handed in. The letter said, Dear Santa, I have Rudolph. If you ever want to see him alive again, bring 2 bags of toys to the corner of Main and Fairmount at midnight on New Year's Eve. No cops, no elves. Deliver the goods at midnight or I'll be eating deer throughout the new year. Of course, Miss G was furious at the urgent parent-teacher conference that was called the following day, and my father's reaction did not help. When the vice principal handed him the letter, my father instantly burst out laughing. Miss G was angry when she demanded that I either needed to go to therapy or the Girl Scouts. To this day, I have zero idea why those were the 2 options. I regret nothing. I freaking love this malicious compliance, guys. And hey, OP was following exact orders, right? Like Miss G did only state a letter to Santa Claus. She didn't say it had to be a nice one. Absolutely brilliant play by OP though, and if I were Miss G, I would be impressed at the creativity. And it was totally uncool of her to call an emergency parent-teacher conference. And I just love hearing that OP's dad took his daughter's side and just laughed out loud at that letter. Talk about a plan backfiring. For some context, I have an extremely bad peanut and tree nut allergy. If I eat or touch peanuts or nuts, I can go into anaphylactic shock, meaning my throat closes and I basically choke to death. Carry an EpiPen with me at all times because of this. So now that you know that, here's some information on this teacher. The woman hated kids. She's the type of teacher who yells at kids if they got something incorrect. And for the sake of keeping everything anonymous, I'll just call her Mrs. Idiot. And with that out of the way, on to the story. I was in 1st grade, and by this time, I had a good grasp on how bad my peanut allergy was. I always read labels, and I never ate at friends' homes, and I was taught that I shouldn't trust someone just because they say, I don't think it has nuts in it. So this was 1st grade, and I was having fun coloring something on paper, waiting for my teacher. As I was finishing drawing, my teacher gets out a fun activity worksheet involving candy. If I remember correctly, it involved counting or something math-related. As she was passing out the worksheets and candy, I noticed they were M&Ms, which I'm allergic to. The interaction went something like this. So I tell her, Mrs. Idiot, I can't have these, I'm allergic. That's when Mrs. Idiot says, they are original M&Ms, they don't have peanuts in them. I just say, but my mom says I'm allergic to the originals too. Mrs. Idiot says, they're fine, you can have them. To this day, I don't know why a teacher would ever tell a kid with allergies to eat something the kid knows or thinks they're allergic to. Also, while the original M&Ms don't have peanuts or nuts directly in them, they're made on the same equipment as peanut M&Ms. This exchange went on for a while, with the idiotic teacher telling me they're fine, and me saying they're not. I think the teacher actually believed that I was purposely trying to annoy her. So that's when Mrs. Idiot says, if you don't start behaving, I'm gonna call your mom and you'll be in big trouble. It's at that point, younger me realized that my mom was gonna say the same thing. And instead of telling her that, I just sat there and smiled at the teacher. And I said, okay, call my mom. I remember wondering why that teacher wouldn't believe me. And looking back, that teacher definitely hated being told she was wrong, especially by a first grader. The idiot teacher looked annoyed, but smug. I guess she was thinking that my mom would yell at me for not obeying her. Now here's the thing, I don't know the full exchange between my mom and that teacher because this was so long ago, and my mom doesn't remember exactly what was said, just that she was extremely angry. I just know that she tore into my teacher because of me, and everyone who was present in the class could hear my mom yelling through the phone. And I think for the first time ever, I saw my idiotic teacher actually nervous. After my mom tore the teacher a new one, the teacher brought me to the corner of the room and she hands me a bag of Skittles, which she apparently had the entire time. Now, it did suck being alone for the activity, but I happily did my assignment, eating my packet of Skittles, knowing fully well that my teacher was simmering at her desk, annoyed that a 7-year-old knew better than she did. Later, it was revealed that my mom sent an email to the school's principal, which luckily for the idiotic teacher's case was my mom's second draft, and it had nicer words in it. The teacher ended up having to do a refresher course on allergies by the nurse. I guess my school was desperate for teachers because she continued to teach at that school, even though she had other incidents. As much as I'd like to say that I ate the M&Ms and watched as her career tanked, blowing up like a Thanksgiving Day parade balloon, I did not. As the wise Sid the Sloth said, no thanks, I choose life. Yeah, it totally surprises me that some teachers actually don't care at all, guys. Like, it shocks me that so many people either don't believe in nut allergies or don't take them seriously. And it's a good thing OP was a first grader who was well aware of how serious their allergies was. Because if they weren't and they trusted that teacher, it might have ended up being a trip to the hospital, which is never good. With that said, I just love how the smug teacher thought OP was being a brat, and she ends up getting the full wrath of a mama bear. That look on her face must have been amazing. So here's a long story for you, which requires some background. So I have a semi-common Hispanic first name, but living in the Midwest United States, people don't always pronounce it correctly. Generally speaking, I think of myself as being fairly flexible with how others pronounce it. If it's our first time meeting, I will say how it's pronounced, and as long as I get somewhere close to the pronunciation after a couple of meetings, I just let it slide and acknowledge their efforts. However, if we've met multiple times and they still clearly make no efforts to pronounce my name correctly, that's when I start taking offense. But that always wasn't the case though. Before, I used to just acknowledge whatever people would call me. But after dealing with some self-confidence issues and going to counseling, I learned to fully embrace my identity, including the correct pronunciation of my name. And I was taught to stick up for myself as well. This story takes place when I was still making that transition. So here's the story. In my teen years, while attending high school, I had a teacher that was a stickler for the rules. She had been teaching for 40 plus years, and she wasn't going to let anyone change her way of doing things. On the very first day of class, she hands out her rules and she explains them to us. One of those rules included the attendance policy. Every day, right after the bell rang for class to begin, she would go through attendance, read off our name, and when we heard our name, we were to say present, not here, not yes, or anything else. We had to say present. Not sure why she was a stickler for that, but whatever. So I had this teacher for 2 years, and for almost 2 years, she would pronounce my name incorrectly. What was more confusing is she would pronounce it incorrectly in different ways each time. During attendance, she would get to my name, and she would pronounce it incorrectly, and then I would say present and say, my name is pronounced like this. She would then go on to the next name, making no acknowledgement to what I said. This went on for about 2 years. I would also like to add that our school was on the smaller side, with classes averaging around 80 to 90 students per grade, and most teachers only focused on 1 to 2 grades. So the average teacher would probably have to work with like 100 to 150 students. And by my sophomore year, every teacher had started pronouncing my name correctly, or they pronounced it correctly from the very beginning. It was during this time that I started going to counseling. The counselor pushed me to embrace who I was more and to stick up for myself as well. So that's exactly what I did. Cue the malicious compliance. Close to the end of my second year with this teacher, I had enough, and I had also built up enough self-confidence to do something about it. The next day, she went through attendance and she just completely butchers my name. So I didn't say anything. The teacher looks around the classroom and she sees me at my desk and she mispronounces my name again. I give her no response. The teacher, louder this time, says to me, "Have you forgotten the rules of my classroom? You are to respond with present when I call your name." That's when I tell her, "Your rules say we're supposed to say present after our name has been called. My name has not been called." She then looks at me and says, "Don't you get smart with me." She then mispronounces my name again, and I tell her, "That's not my name, it's..." She then cuts me off and says, "That's it. I'm not putting up with this. Go to the office right now and see the principal." Almost in tears, I head to the office, unsure of what I'd done or in what kind of trouble I would be in. But here's the kicker. In between my freshman and sophomore year, we got a new vice principal. The new vice principal was Hispanic as well and was fully aware of the counseling I was taking. So I walk into the office and she's the first one to greet me. I then tell her what happened and I can see her face slowly turning red with anger. She then attempts to regain her control and she tells me to go to her office and work on some homework until my next class period. That she'll talk to the teacher and to not worry about her. The next day, I walk into that class again, unsure of what to expect. The teacher simply begins the class without calling attendance and she makes no acknowledgement of me. This continues for a week until we're informed that the teacher and the school board have agreed that she'll be taking an early retirement before the end of the school year, and that we'll finish off the class with a substitute teacher for the remainder of the year. I later found out that she has a habit of doing this to many other ethnic kids as well. She never made the effort to pronounce anybody's name properly, and she was always butchering it. There was a little over a month left in the year, so it ends up just being movies before a very watered-down final exam on the last week. Of course, the rumors through the school was that she was forced out and she did not receive her full retirement, but I can't confirm if any of those are true. I never saw her again, and I went through the rest of my high school days slowly growing my confidence. I'm gonna be totally honest, guys, I did not expect that teacher to lose her job, but I am happy it happened. And wouldn't that be the cherry on top if she also lost out on her retirement? But seriously, finding out that the teacher often did this to other ethnic students as well is ridiculous. Like, a teacher should not be doing that. And if I were Nopi Shoes, I would be dishing it right back. Believe me, I would never call her by whatever her last name is. So this happened years ago, during the time where practically everyone was working and doing schooling from home. Now, there's two important background things to know for this story. Number one, I was diagnosed with a very rare ovarian cancer at the time. I had surgery and some chemo, and I'm mostly recovered now. I'm also a private person, to the extent that I've dated people for years without telling my parents. So you best believe random coworkers and bosses are unaware of my medical history. Number two, I attend a university that has an ambassador program. Basically, if you have a high enough GPA, you're able to interview for the program. And if you get in, they pay your tuition during the time you are an ambassador. In exchange, you work 5 hours a week and work graduation and other events. I'm one of those ambassadors, and this is my story. Cue the Law and Order sound effect. So my supervisor for the ambassador program, Miss M, has spent the majority of our time together belittling me. As I sit here about to type about her, I find myself exasperated, thinking about reliving some of the details. So I will be short and sweet, for both your sake and mine. The woman follows every rule to the letter, and she leaves no room for collaboration or discussion. As an example, we use Microsoft Teams for communication, and she has us clock in and out in a group of 20 people by saying I'm here and I'm leaving. So every day, you have to scroll through dozens of messages to find anything of importance. And you have to listen to notification sounds every time someone so much as takes a lunch break. I suggested using the time clock function on Teams, and even offered to set it up for us, and I was told I was deliberately undermining her position. Another quick example is her vehemence when I told her I didn't have any social media to advertise for college. The woman was certain I was lying, and she went as far as to ask the other ambassadors to try and find me. They couldn't, because there was nothing to find. Crazy concept. I've also challenged her at a couple of junctures, but ultimately realized that I was fighting a losing battle, and I would be better off keeping my head down. Fast forward to when this happened. It took place on a Friday, where there's a mandatory virtual event in 3 days, where the dean of the college would talk to the ambassadors, as well as live stream the event to the college's website and YouTube page. So Miss M sends out a message that I'll copy and paste here because the formatting is so dramatic that it makes me chuckle. She wrote, "Students must have their cameras on and phones off. Repeat, phones off, cameras on." I follow up the same day saying, "Miss M, unfortunately I'll be at the doctor's appointment at this time and I'll be unable to turn my camera on for the event." No response. So I send another email to follow up, and there was no response to that as well. So the day of the event rolls around. I direct message her through Microsoft Teams 10 minutes before. I see that she's seen the message with the red receipt and she doesn't respond. And I'm thinking, okay, so the video chat starts and several students join the session with their cameras on. And then the dean comes on. He gets halfway through introducing himself, and that's when Miss M interrupts him as he takes a brief pause. And she says, "Excuse me, can we please have all of the students turn their cameras on?" Now, I say nothing, but I send a quick message that I already typed in anticipation in the group chat. The message said, "Miss M, I have a private situation that bars me from turning my camera on. I've contacted you individually." Not even a few seconds after I send it, I get called out by my name, and I respond audibly, "Miss M, I cannot turn my camera on at this time." And at that she responds, "The expectations were clear, and you were told multiple times about this. Every other student here has managed to do it, and I expect the same out of you." Now, one of the cool things about having cancer is you become very familiar with the hospital staff, and if you're lucky, they're fun to talk to. So I told one of my nurses, Amy, about this situation beforehand. She jokes that if I was told to turn my camera on, that I should really play up my illness. In any other situation, I would have been entirely opposed. But sweet revenge was in sight. So with that, I set my laptop back a bit further from myself, on my legs, so you could see the entirety of me in my hospital gown. If you've never used Teams, Teams will display the person currently talking as the largest image in the chat. Everyone had their audio off except for me, the dean, and Miss M. So when I turned my camera on, I was displayed, as the EKG loudly thrummed away, on max volume thanks to Nurse Amy. There was complete silence. I then say I had asked Miss M through email and Teams if I could opt out of having my camera on, but she insisted. I then waited a beat to see if anyone would say anything, and then I continued with my special vocal blend of melodramatic gratitude and illness-laden shakiness. I began to say, virtual engagement is so important for this new era of learning. I can see why having the camera on is important, though I was hoping I might have been granted an exception. That's when the dean says, "Miss R, you are more than welcome to turn your camera off. I'm so sorry for the misunderstanding." I say to the dean, "Thank you so much for making a special exception for me. It's been a difficult week, but I feel grateful to be here." Then I notice 2 people leaving the call. One was Miss M, and the other was Anthony, who's Miss M's boss. I didn't know the guy would be there. I haven't heard from either of them yet, but I'm awaiting a follow-up with anticipation. I typed this up from the hospital, but I'm feeling gratitude for a lot of things. I'm here, and I'm alive, and above all, this stupid disease won't stop me from putting a bully in their place. Update number 1. So the day after, I'm discharged from the hospital. I file a formal complaint to the college regarding the incident, and I ask for the videos to be removed from any public forum. From what I can tell at the time, this has already happened, but I wanted it to be clear that I did not consent to it being publicized any further. The first day back to the program since our fun little dean meeting, I scroll through the previous messages in the chat, and I notice that Miss M has an out-of-office status by her name, as opposed to away or online, etc. As soon as I clock in, I receive a message from Anthony, who you may recall is Miss M's boss, asking if I have a moment to speak. I do. I might add, he pointedly offers twice to let me choose the medium which we communicate, whether that be video chat, audio, or over messages. What follows is a video call with myself, him, and one unknown person whom I suspect was a lawyer. I was then met with vague half-apologies and follow-up questions that can best be described as a litmus test to see how F they were. I was also a bit vague, out of morbid curiosity, but then it occurs to me that this is neither Anthony's nor the college's direct fault. So I ask if I can voice some concerns I have with the ambassador program. I've already created a list at this point of the issues I'd like to bring up. He and I proceed to have a very cordial conversation about small things and bigger ones. He listens to me and he actively takes notes. He then asked if I can voice my concerns to some board members, and I say absolutely. The day of the meeting comes and I clock in and I hype myself up to speak with the board during the shift. It also might be worth noting that I'm not a great improviser, but given time to prepare, I can generally get my point across eloquently. I speak with them for an hour and 10 minutes, and to save you some time, I'll just give you a few main points. Point number 1. There are many reasons that a student might not be able to turn on a camera, such as their income, mental health, or comfort with their current environment, and demanding they do is directly discriminatory against those students. Point number 2. Regardless of anything that transpired, I was treated and spoken to like I was not only incapable, but malicious. It should not have taken my having literal cancer for this to be noticed and addressed on the team. The dean stays after to talk with me. He asked how I'm feeling, how was my vacation, how's finals, just small talk. I then transition us to Miss M, and I ask how she is, as we haven't seen her for a little over a week now. The dean doesn't tell me much, but he told me that she's no longer working for the university. Also, many of you have predicted this, but I wasn't surprised that I didn't get much of an apology from anyone. Maybe they're worried that that would be seen as accepting blame, when they would just rather amputate the infection and hope for the best. I wish I had more spiciness for you all, but that's all I have. The outpouring support has been lovely, and thank you for the warm wishes and tales of sweet revenge you've all been flooding me with. May we all live to see the end of cancer and a-hole teachers and bosses. Guys, what a story that was, and I absolutely love it when petty tyrants get put in their place. Like, it was incredibly satisfying when Miss M was called out in front of the dean and her boss and all those students. And that's exactly what she gets. I just hope she learned her lesson in the end. Like, was it worth losing your career over? So this isn't that long or interesting, but it's definitely funny enough to post here. I work at an elite school, and I mean elite, to the level of being the place many actors, politicians, and business people decide to put their kids. It costs at least $40,000 a year. I'm an assistant to one of the head teachers in the school, so I saw this happen very closely. My school doesn't have a teacher's lounge. Usually, the teachers would only interact during the 15-minute break or during lunch at the teacher's cafeteria. Since I started, things were like this, and no one had an issue with it until last week, when we received a message from HR that made everyone extremely angry. The message read, "Only the specialist teachers and administrative employees are allowed to stay at the teacher's cafeteria during the morning break. Assistants and class teachers are only to have their snack with their students, and they can grab their coffee in the break room from the janitorial staff." So that means that out of nowhere, we not only lose one more space where we can rest from the classroom madness, but we also have to basically occupy a space that isn't ours, just to have coffee. Their justification was that since the teacher's staff doubled in size since last year, we need to stop occupying so much of the cafeteria because it was getting too busy and people were taking too long of their breaks because of that. As far as people knew, nobody made that complaint and it was taken out of HR's ass. People were visibly angry, but nobody talked about anything until that's when the most amazing silent malicious compliance happened for the entire teaching staff. We just grabbed our coffee and we sat on the corridor in front of the teacher's cafeteria. Now imagine, just imagine, about 35 to 40 teachers just sitting on the floor. Everybody with a coffee, bread and butter, having their break like nothing happened. People would stop by, see what was happening, and they would join in. Eventually, we would slowly just start going inside the teacher's cafeteria and ignoring the HR's orders, which made them go back on what they said and allowed everyone to use the cafeteria normally. But the most impressive thing is that no one talked to each other. We just started doing the malicious compliance like we already knew how to deal with this. And that, my friends, brings us to another end of our /malicious compliance. Guys, I hope you enjoyed today's stories. If you did, hit that thumbs up. And if you're not subscribed, consider subscribing so you don't miss these crazy stories. And if you missed the last episode on the channel, it's in our /entitled people episode, where Karens are wanting people to die so they can steal their inheritance. It's such a wild episode, so go check it out if you haven't, and myself and Stevie Boy will see you guys in the next one. We love you.